Here we are again, WorldView. This is our last WorldView or live discussion on WorldView for 2022. It's been an amazing year of amazing conversations with a lot of interesting interaction from lots of interesting people, which was obviously going to culminate in the ANC's conference, 55th annual conference, which has just finished. And they've elected a whole new set of people. Well, not really. I mean, the ANC's pool from which it pulls out leaders over the years has been the same pool over and over again. We've seen people being recycled, people we thought never existed anymore, coming back to life, and hopefully with new texts, hoping that South Africans would forget who they are, what they did, why they disappeared in the first place. Today, I have with me Mandisa Mashego and Tsepa Matsiba, two awesome South Africans who say it the way it should be. And Houda is joining us. Of course, Houda is another South African who also came from the belly of the African National Congress. He has a very good sense of policy making there. He's legally trained, and he has an amazingly good eye of analysis of South African affairs. Guys, welcome. Thanks again for joining me for this last conversation. What do you make of what South Africa has just gone through, what the ANC has just gone through, South Africa? Do you want to do ladies first? Mandisa?
I suppose. Hi, Solly. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Look, I mean, obviously, like we said the last time, the worst case, best case scenario would be in the ANC context for Ramaphosa to basically win the conference, right?
Right.
Not that it's a great thing. It's definitely not a great thing because, you know, I'm an anti-vaxxer, and I saw today, it was hardly a week after the ANC conference, and already they are manufacturing extra boosters. So, you know, we are definitely in for an imperialist totalitarian takeover with this guy. And it wasn't ever going to be any better. I mean, if it's not the infrastructure in Johannesburg, for instance, this week, we've been warned to take it easy on water. And already the water pressure in my area has already gone down. So, you know, I think really, to be honest, as South Africans, we need to get out of the whatever Cinderella story we told ourselves in 1994 and start grappling with the idea that we might have to rebuild this country ourselves as citizens, really.
Okay, I mean, surely I went past the discussion long ago in terms of whether or not South Africa can still survive without the ANC. I mean, I'm worried that you, Mandisa, are saying today, on the 23rd of December 2022, that we should think about standing up without the ANC. No, we should have realized that long ago. Really.
No, definitely, I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to be argumentative. I agree with you. You and I, at our level, I think we've long accepted that things are going south very quickly. Excuse the pun. But you need to understand that we shouldn't speak to ourselves and amongst ourselves. We have ordinary South Africans, by and large, at least at the height of it, 31 million people were in social grants. And not that those are people who are not intelligent or not educated or whatever, but the reality is that there are many, many, many South Africans who actually believe that you know, government is there to take care of us, and sometime soon things will get better. And so we need to get everybody on the same page fast.
I agree. Houda? Hello, Houda. What do you make of it?
Cyril Ramaphosa was going to win, was destined to win, because of the power of incumbency, the advantage of office. And he has money, and he was already ahead. He has the patronage on his side, and yes, incumbency was on his side. It's very difficult in the ANC to beat a sitting president for the second term, precisely because of the reasons that I've given. Yes, the second term is going to be a lame duck because the ANC members will be looking to aggrandize themselves to the supporter, the next, what do you call it? His successor. Now, yes, Mandisa's got her finger on the pulse. the ANC is ruinous and has run out of ideas. It's a criminal syndicate and it's a closed crony system. And there's no way in which we can expect the Ramaphosa government to do anything, especially when we're about to go into elections. 2023 is going to be a very short year, a year before the election. So presidents don't do much on an election in an election year. So forget it. He's not going to remove the mafia at ESCOM, in the public service, in Transnet, or anywhere. No.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I mean, surely politically, Ramaphosa has been strengthened. Everybody seems to agree, at least most people seem to agree, and analysts and observers, that the NEC that
Solely,
he's
he was
walking away
always
with.
strong.
No, wait. No,
Yes,
no,
he
he
was
wasn't.
already, he was
No,
always
no, give
strong.
me. No. Hold up, please listen.
He was.
The NEC, you're not going to have a conversation if you can't listen. The NEC that he's walking away with is a lot more on his side than the NEC that he walked away with in 2007. And you must remember that he has just been reappointed or elected rather for another 5 years. So politically, he's okay, unless the criminal justice system comes down on him on Palapala. But nobody can touch him politically. He's got the 5 years secured. Then the next thing is for him to convince the rest of South Africans that the ANC that he's leading into 2024 is the kind of ANC that they can trust to deliver and to stay in power.
Yeah, I agree with you. He beat his rival, but with a slim majority.
Okay.
Those people in Natal, 800 delegates, are leaders in their own right, and they've got values that are different or opposed, diametrically opposed to the values of the Constitution, and they still exist, and they still wield power. He won with a slim majority. He's still beholden to the ANC. The ANC is not a transformative institution. It's a closed crony system. It has not seen its Damascus moment. You can see just for electing some of those people, Nomvula Mokonyane, Paul Mashatile, shows you that the ANC is still the ANC, which has not come back into the new South Africa that we are trying to build. It is still a counter-revolutionary force which has been launched against the Republic.
Yeah, they're still talking about the
same old institution. The ANC is not going to be transformed, and it's not going to transform, and Ramaphosa is not going to transform this country in an election year.
Okay, that's fine. Tsepo, we'll talk about what is possibly going to happen both inside of the ANC and what that could possibly mean for South Africa. But let's hear about Tsepo's take on what happened recently.
Yeah, look, you've got the devil, and then you've got the better devil, because the better devil maybe looks sexier, and maybe the better devil is less lethal. But that's what we have, and I tend to agree with Khauta. I think though one is tempted to just purely say from the outset to congratulate President Ramaphosa and his team for their achievement. The reality of that achievement, though, we hope will start to see some shifts, and I think there's an opportunity immediately to start seeing some shifts. I didn't expect, though, some of the individuals in the room to miscalculate the way they miscalculated. For example, when we look at the leader of the ANC in Limpopo, Mathabate, who's currently the premier, and the miscalculation he did on at the last second to switch sides from saying he's the one who actually first said, I stand with Ramaphosa, and we nominate him to lead again, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the battle he changed the strategy, and that strategy, that sudden shift has cost him, I think, image-wise, but it has also cost him from a trust point of view, because one would wonder whether you can trust such a person in any context, who can make this massive proclamation, even though they say wise men always change their minds, but this specific one was, I think, a miscalculation. It was also interesting to see the ANC allowing the likes of Jacob Zuma to play a destructive role in that conference by arriving at the time when he arrived, which you could see the timing was well calculated, and the extent to which he caused some disruption. In fact, a lot of disruption during a significant moment in the ANC's process of that elective conference.
Right.
So my observation is that, look, some people have won. We've got a better, I think, devil than we think we could have had. But there's no one in that room, especially at the top six, who can say, or who are contesting the top six, who can say, hey, I'm clean and I'm innocent and I have no image, or I have no questions that I need to answer. Now, I was looking at media headlines internationally this morning, and when you look at platforms such as the New York Times, they are still talking about, their keywords, the sofa, and they do call it a sofa, but the sofa and the money, US dollars in that sofa, and a delinquent or a very, very, saddened leader who has no direction and who's not going to make decisions against such a party that is so full of individuals who are willing to betray each other in the quest for power and positions. So that's where I would start as an observation.
So do you guys all agree that, there was a whole talk of Ramaphosa is coming in 2017, is going to be the savior of South Africa. There was a whole Ramaphosa thing, which we all, I think, agree that it's his time. Do you see Ramaphosa being reloaded ahead of 2024, Melissa? Melissa, did you hear me?
I think that if you look at global politics, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you?
We can
Am
hear
I
you.
coming through? Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We had a load shedding exchange, like the lights had just come back, so it normally disrupts the signal. I'm saying that before I answer your question, I see some of your guests are greeting. Temba Tobela was saying good evening, so I also wanted to say good evening. And I saw two very interesting comments later that I'd like to comment to. But we need to understand that geopolitically, I want to take you back to a meeting of is it the G8 or the G7? I never know, G20, one of those three meetings some years back met and discussed. And of course, those meetings are always about, obviously, the whether it's East or West, but it's about the powerful, productive economic forces of the world. And at some point, it sounded like there were very encouraging conversations about the global agenda shifting back to localization, because it was obvious that definitely in South Africa it is, that the globalized economic environment is very unhealthy for a developing country, because it then we don't get an opportunity to develop ourselves, make goods and services available for ourselves, so as we can create our own employment, and we end up being reliant on imports from basically not just China but the Middle East and many other countries. And so in that context, I think that as South Africans, we've been very naive to believe that one person in one political party that is elected by a minority in that political party, 4,400 people, I think, just under 4,400 people who were delegates in the ANC conference, by far, even with however skewed a perspective of proportional representation you might have, but 4,400 people by far can never, ever, however intelligent they may be, adequately represent 60 million almost South Africans. So that's the second problem. The first problem is the issue of the globalized economic environment that we exist in, that we sort of have been forced into, and it's not just South African economic policy, regulatory, and basically the law itself. It's not just those various aspects. It's also global, treaties and agreements that South Africa participates in. And I would even add the rest of Africa through the World Trade Organization, and other global entities. But the point I wanted to make was Ramaphosa himself as an individual is obviously very embracing of the globalist agenda, of the globalization agenda. He has interests. If you look at all his business interests, they tend to tie in with other global players who really can only be described as oligarchs. And we've seen how they play their game with COVID, and we see how they play their game in the energy environment, and we definitely see how they play their game in big tech. We see how they play their game in big pharma. We see how they play their game in big financial services entity. And really that entire global agenda, which the ANC has completely bought into without considering the specific needs of the South African population, and also SADC, because whether we like it or not, South Africa really is responsible almost for the financial stability of the countries around us, Mozambique, maybe to a lesser extent Botswana, but definitely Mozambique, Swaziland.
So what should happen? Tell us what you think should happen. Because you're describing the problem. Tell us what you think the emerging South Africa should do.
I was taking it from the context of your question and specifically about Ramaphosa. Okay. We really have no way out. I mean, I'm a proponent for electoral reforms, and at every opportunity, I mean, it's gotten to the point where I sound like I'm a little bit of a cult unto myself. But the reality is that until South Africans can actually as far as government is concerned, because business also comes into play, but as far as government is concerned, in terms of lawmaking and regulation and policy setting, we definitely need an environment that is a lot more open, a lot more freer, where we are not having policies imposed on us just because a political party won. We need an electoral environment that's going to force individuals who are politically active, whether within political parties or in other independent organizations or on their own as individuals, to have a lot more engagement with society at large, and then agree how we're going to design economic policies that are going to be more suitable for us. It's very clear that a much more, how can I put it, a much more decentralized, for instance, economic, environment is required. I mean, I can give you very simple.
But Mandisa, wait. The thing is, until 2024, the ANC holds the electoral mandate to govern South Africa. All these things you're saying, offensive, it could be done. But what do you think is going to happen? Let's talk about the reality facing South Africa today. The reality facing South Africa is the ANC has just gone through a conference. They've chosen new leaders. Ramaphosa has just been reloaded, whatever one would do. And what does it mean for South Africa? I mean, we could talk about how South Africa's government or governance could be structured, but that's not relevant to this discussion. The discussion is, what do you think is going to happen? What's the implication of what's the ANC has just gone through for South Africa? That's what I'm interested in.
Already, we've got a water crisis in Johannesburg, like I've just mentioned to you earlier, which was announced, I think, yesterday, if not earlier this morning. And so service delivery, and then there's and what Rand Water was saying, just to make the example a little bit more clearer, what Rand Water was complaining about is the same thing that Eskom constantly complains about, saying that their infrastructure has been tampered with, they've had infrastructural damage. And so what does that mean? Rand Water and the Water and Sanitation Department is not learning from the mistakes that Eskom is doing of not looking after the infrastructure adequately or not maintaining it, whatever the problem is. But the reality is that we're going to get the same. For the next 2 years, it's going to be probably even worse, because as Hauta correctly said, for the next, let's say 18 months, the political parties are going to start being in campaigning mode. And it's a big problem for us because we've just come out of the 2021 local government elections. So essentially every 2.5 or 3 years, we have elections in South Africa. And perhaps that's another contributing factor to the fact that over and above the corruption and the mismanagement, maladministration, the thieving, the looting, and the incompetent people that really get positions in very critical government positions. The other problem is that every 2.5 years, we go to elections, and it's not healthy in an environment where the electoral system and the electoral environment is anti citizens, and it's anti-democracy and pro a dictatorship really of the minority, like I was trying to indicate, with the 4,300 delegates of the ANC deciding on who should lead their political party, which happens to be governing at the moment. But they're really essentially making that decision for all the people who voted for the ANC and who then in turn gave the ANC a majority that then gave them authority and permission to govern over all of us.
Okay, guys, what do other guys think about it? Can you think about, Mandisa was going to refer to some of the questions. Just a minute. Mandisa, I don't know if there's a specific one that, but let's get to it later.
I can come back.
Just a minute. Okay, just a minute. There's somebody who's saying, for instance, what is your guest's opinion on Malema and others' contention that CR is a puppet of, well, we pretty much spoke to that, I think, Mandisa. Is he a puppet of white monopoly capital? Aka the Oppenheimers? Is he a puppet?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I hold a very different view about this white monopoly capital narrative. I think it's important for certain sectors of society to keep talking about it. But Cyril Ramaphosa's pressing difficulties, and if he has to, let's start with if he has to fail. He's going to fail if he does not deal with the unemployment crisis amongst young people. He's going to fail if he fails to address the question of the expropriation of land and dispersing the land equitably, because the situation of the land are broken promises that were made by the ANC for many, many years. So his failure is around those type of issues. He's around the failure to address the pressing economic crisis, the crisis in the education sector and access to quality education. And then, of course, perhaps one may add the energy crisis. For him to maintain the Minister of Public Enterprises, and of course for him to also perhaps even maintain the Minister of Energy and Minerals, those two portfolios, even if the other one has just won the chairmanship of the ANC, those were extremely poor performers in the last 5 years. And to fail to deliver on that and wait for 2024 will be a big mistake. These are the people who should be reshuffled almost with immediate effect, so that we address the energy crisis almost immediately. There are many other factors, but is he
a puppet or is he not a puppet?
Sorry, I wanted to say there are many other factors, but I doubt that white monopoly capital is the reason. Is he a puppet? Absolutely not. Here you are dealing with someone who's compromised on one or two factors. Maybe one of the most important factors in recent times is the matter of Phala Phala. But is he a puppet? No, absolutely not. Is he compromised? Most probably yes.
Okay. AB, Houta, do you agree with all of that? Houta, are you there? Hello? Houta can hear me.
No, I don't agree that he's a puppet. Look, South Africa is a mixed economy, and we need big business to continue investing in this country. That's why he goes overseas every time to look for investors. It's just that the ANC is anti-investor for their own self-serving interests. So the white monopoly capital is not an enemy. There's a healthy contestation of ideology between progressives and capitalists is there all over the world. So this infantilizing of black people, infantilizing of Ramaphosa is a bit childish, you know.
I mean, look, I tend to agree with you that South Africa, just like any other country in the world, doesn't live on an island, doesn't exist on an island of its own. We have to trade with the world. The question is not whether or not we attract investors, which we should, of course, I believe. Whether we or not we allow companies out from outside, whether we import it. Those are not. The question is, what is the balance that we keep in that? To what extent do we then, in enabling South Africa, opening up the South African economy to the world, which I believe we should, we don't do it in a way that we become owned by other people. In other words, we need to control something, right? We can't let the Chinese or the Russians or the Europeans or the Americans come to South Africa and just do what they want, because they don't allow us to do whatever we want in their own country. So Do you think Ramaphosa and the ANC have it in themselves to know where to draw the line?
If I could step in there, I look, I mean, we can't ask questions about the ANC that are evidently, open, the answers to which are evident, evidently.
To us. We're talking to ourselves.
Exactly. The answers are evidently open to all of us. I mean, we've all experienced them one way or the other. I want, to basically shed a little bit of different light to your question. Look at local government in South Africa today. We're talking about investment, right? So I'm agreeing with Tsepo. Of course, he has to do something about the employment. Somebody has to do something about the employment. All of us have to do something about unemployment in South Africa. It's becoming a really seriously, depressing security risk. It's just we can't even afford to pay the grants that we are actually paying right now. I mean, if you look at since Ramaphosa has come in, how many times has the South African government borrowed money from the IMF? I'm not sure which other institutions, both the IMF and the World Bank. I'm not sure if they've been borrowing money from other institutions. I'm not aware whether they've received money from the African Development Bank. I'm not aware whether they've received more money from BRICS or any other development finance institutions. But here's the thing. Even if you had, so firstly, the question about the concentration of a few, strong white people who have, I suppose, majority of the shares at the JSE that are still in South African hands, because, by the way, the JSE itself, and I'm just adding to the globalist agenda that I was mentioning earlier, the JSE itself, for instance, in South Africa is majority foreign, right? Foreign owned. So the ownership, whether or not Cyril Ramaphosa is actually married permanently to white capital in South Africa is obviously a question that is very easy to answer. We just need to look at all the shares that he holds, right? In all the companies that he has shares in, and ask ourselves, what is the position of those companies that Cyril Ramaphosa has shares in, to whatever extent his shares might be, that he has shares in. He might not be active anymore because obviously as president he had to, stop being active in those companies, but he still has those shares one way, whether he put them in a non-profit company or some kind of foundation, or gave it to a relative or a silent partner or a law firm or a trust or whatever, it doesn't matter, but those shares are still his. We just need to look at those shares and compute them and say, what is the dominance economically of each and every one of those companies that he has shares in its sector in South Africa? Right? And then open it up. And then that question will be simply answered. But the issue of investment, the ANC over the next 2 years, let's say over the next 2 years until elections, the ANC and all parties that are governing at local level currently need to very, very urgently address the question of investment at local level. Because we all know that currently what is stopping the investment in South Africa is predominantly the disinvestment that has happened, even locally. I'm talking domestic investment. If you remember the Clover SA issue, where Clover SA had to leave some town in the northwest, Gauteng can maybe add more to that, because of the issue of not being able to take care of the infrastructure, even when you even have the investors there. And I'm talking about a domestic investor that has been in the domestic environment for decades and decades, such as Clover SA. And so the biggest job, I think, currently for Ramaphosa, besides, the corruption fighting and trying to prevent and trying to close some skeletons that are trying to fall out of cupboards, and all the ESCOM, the energy crisis, the water crisis, all the housing issue, there's just so many problems, the massive corruption, the SAPS. The biggest issue, if any of the political parties currently want to make a dent in South Africa and impress South Africans, is to open up investment properly and stop these, I don't know whether they call themselves business fora or they call themselves construction or
mafia,
fora,
the construction and mafia, those ones.
But the reality is that nobody is able to invest, nobody is even able to buy a piece of land without the rigmarole of the corruption and threatening each other with this, that, and the other. Oh no, you can't do this there until you've paid this political party so much. I mean, even opening up the Political Party Funding Act to say that all monies that go to political parties must be openly declared. Even that doesn't seem to be working. We see local government collapsing faster and faster. 40-something insolvent municipalities, 151 dysfunctional, with a whole lot of crisis. So it doesn't matter really what happens at national level now. We need a micro economy at local economic level to start, shaping up and reshaping up and fixing itself and sorting itself out at the same level that we need the infrastructural improvements and fixes to start happening also ASAP. But I don't see that happening in the next 2 years.
So Ramaphosa, leading to the conference, was confronted publicly by two of his ministers, at least, Lindiwe Sisulu and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. And Lindiwe Sisulu didn't vote in that motion. She decided to walk out or not to be there. She did explain it later. And Nkosazana Dlamini, but both of them have been quite consistent that Ramaphosa is not the right person. He should go. Ramaphosa has a new, leadership team around him. He's going to, I think it should be expected that there's going to be some kind of cabinet reshuffle. Whom do you think should go? And do you think these two ladies should be kept? And if yes, why? Tsepo and then Khauta?
I'll give this one a go, a quick one. And I've said already that I think Pravin Gordhan needs to shift as quickly as possible. I doubt
you mean shift? You mean redeploy or get out of cabinet?
In the first place, and may I not be accused of ageism and those kind of things. In the first place, we need to rid ourselves of people who are supposed to have retired by now, because by the time we are up working, they are asleep, catching up on the much needed rest. So the retirement process must take place. So in the context of ESCOM and all the state-owned enterprises, he needs to be probably the first to go. If I were
but it shouldn't be because of his age. It should be about whether or not he's effective. That's why
I've already spoken about competence and his competence earlier, and so I'll park that for now. But I think at the core of the strategy that President Cyril Ramaphosa should apply is that you can't work, quite frankly, in the context of the ANC, you can't work with leaders who believe you are not supposed to be there, because he himself is not. He didn't place himself where he is. There are other forces around him that said, "Do not resign," and so he can't stay with unfortunately the Lindiwe Sisulus, the Dlamini Zumas. It's not going to happen. That's not how the politics work. And you have to be realistic as a politician in the context of the ANC and in the context of South African electoral system, as weak as it is, with its weaknesses and so on.
So which other minister should go? What should happen to David Mabuza?
Oh no! I mean, someone asked that question. I think it was Temba earlier. I think he has decided to help himself. To step aside on his own, really, because the odds were just not in his favor. From time to time, he says "Ikatilwile," but when you look at his performance in government, at least from a public point of view and from a citizen perspective, as a citizen, I didn't see him take over and take charge of government business, which was out of his responsibilities. So I don't think he should come back. I think where we are at right now, we need to support the Godongwanis of this world, and that's because in certain portfolios you don't want necessarily instability. And Godongwani has shown some really positive energy, despite that one incident that he had in some lodge in Kruger National Park, where he's accused of sexual harassment. It never came actually to anything at this point. Besides that, he from a policy point of view and from a delivery point of view, he seems to be talking the right language.
And he's not gonna work.
And he didn't seem like he was sleeping.
He failed to do. Listen, that guy. I mean, he couldn't even release disaster relief money. Now I'm hearing 300 million needed by Johannesburg. And that money, we must remember that and which is another a policy, finance management or fiscus management policy problem with the South African government specifically. The disaster relief money, which obviously comes from the national collections of revenue, right? Probably from SARS, own revenue from government somewhere, but it comes from a national allocation. But metros are able to save their own money and have their own disaster relief fund because they're a little bit better managed than the district and local municipalities. Godongwane has not. He pussyfooted and even lied about releasing eThekwini's disaster relief funds when they had the floods, the second floods, the first floods that happened last year, and then the second disaster this year. None of that money was released. None of the housing structures were fixed in time. Up to now, the city of eThekwini was actually using money that they were redirecting from other priorities in the metro to sort out the disaster issue. It's still a crisis. You know that the revenue that eThekwini normally gets around this time of the year, of course, it escalates year to year, but it's a bit probably between 2 and 4 billion rand from tourism alone, just over the December season, right? They can't get that money now because all the beaches are closed, and correctly so. And why are the beaches closed? They have not been able to fix any of the damages infrastructurally that came about as a result of
all the sewage that's flowing into the sea, the levels of ecoline now. Massive.
And that sewage is an old problem. It's a problem that emanated from the time Yagam, what's this lady's name, Zandile Gumede, who was the mayor at the time, and another guy called Sipho Nzuza, who at the time was the municipal manager. And there was a 380 million rand that completely disappeared, and the only thing that was there, evidence of that money, were all the fancy cars that were taken from Zandile's house. But the point I'm making is that that money is gone. Godongwane for an entire year and longer didn't, as a head of treasury, didn't see it, fit to even give the public of eThekwini or KZN an explanation as to why he couldn't do that. Right now, we're sitting with Johannesburg also needing 300 million rand. Godongwane, by the way, you need
but
to
a lot of money. I'm sorry, a lot of money gets released. It doesn't go where it's supposed to go. Come on, it's one thing to give governments, local governments, money, but a lot of times the money goes to tenders for friends and buddies, and 80% of it is used to buy all fleshy houses and cars all over the country.
Of course, that's what Zandile got. She bought herself a couple of Ferraris, and that's why I added that part of that infrastructure problem was precisely because of the 380 million that disappeared during her time, and she hasn't been arrested yet. None of the people basically are even behind bars right now. The point I'm also trying to raise. I'm not arguing with Tsepo about his favorite finance.
We don't have a lot of time.
You're not going to have maybe the deputy minister, maybe David Masondo. You might, might do a better job. I don't know, but definitely not Godongwane.
What do you think should happen to NDZ and Sisulu in the next cabinet? Should they go?
Lindiwe and Mamzuma.
Yes.
Maybe Gauta has a better opinion.
You don't have an opinion.
No, I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's an answer. Mandisa Machego doesn't have an opinion.
No, they've both been in parliament since 1994. I mean, I'm not ageist. And I certainly, when you look at the ANC, I think that to keep on pushing for young people is excessively dangerous. Those young people in the ANC are more violent, more, more crass. By and large, I'm not saying all of them. Saying all of them, but look at the lady who was a spokesperson. She's younger than me, I think, who was a spokesperson for Ramaphosa. And the scandal that
she's
elected in the NEC. What's her name? I forget her name. And she's very young.
What's her name?
Kusela Diko. Exactly. Who was involved in the
she's Tsepo's body. That's why Tsepo is smiling like that. She's Tsepo's body.
Tsepo is lobbying for his ANC friends to be in cabinet.
No, I'll leave this one for Gauta. Gauta has a view on this one, definitely.
Guys, we cannot have an honest conversations with South Africans. We've got people listening to this discussion while we are afraid to say certain things because some of the things, some of the things affect people who are friends with us, but who are dodgy, who've done wrong things. This is about South Africa. This is not about whether or not I want to make sure that that tender doesn't, slip out because, I said the truth is to say Kusela Diko should not be there. Okay, the truth is all these people that we like, but that have done wrong for South Africa should not be there. South Africa has got amazing people in all parties, even also outside of political parties, who should be in positions of leadership and who should place South Africa ahead of everything else. When my buddy steals from South Africans, he's not my buddy anymore. That's how it goes.
Of course.
No, definitely, that's true. I mean,
Look,
sorry.
How do you want to say? Go ahead.
Yeah. Whether I don't believe that Ramaphosa should purge anyone merely because they stood against him in the conference, they challenged him. The ANC constitution gives them the right to stand for elections and to participate in elections. It is undemocratic to do so. The way also that Mbalula has said that he doesn't, SSG is going to stop people from having a conscience. It is that cult of personality that is developing in the African National Congress. For me, I don't have much regard for anybody in the NEC or in that closed crony system. The ANC doesn't have ideas. It has run out of ideas. Nobody makes an impact there. Ramaphosa has absolutely no moral authority in that party. He doesn't impart any good moral and ethical values in that political party.
But wait a minute.
It is past its sell by date.
What happened to the expression ministers? What happened to the expression ministers serve at the pleasure of the president? Surely, if any one of you were president, you want to put around you a team that's good, because you go out there you make promises. This is what I'm going to deliver on, and you want to make sure whether you're running a company, an NGO, a big small company, you want to be surrounded by a team of people who will work with you. The minute somebody starts going out there's no democracy. This is my team. I'm employing you in this team to deliver on this. If you want to run your own company, go out there. Surely he can fire them. I think you should fire them.
Look, I mean, the reality is that
fire them for challenge. Fire them for contending the presidency. That's not the reason. You fire people because of performance.
No. You're acting angry now. This is not about.
Let me tell you why they should be fired.
No.
Let me tell you why they should be fired.
Okay.
Let me tell you why people should be fired in that cabinet.
There don't generalize. No, please. Don't generalize. Speak about these particular ladies, Sisulu and NDZ. Let's not generalize the conversation. Then it's not going anywhere. What do you think should happen to these women? If you think they should be fired, why? If not, why? These two women, don't generalize the discussion. And then it's not interesting.
I see what you mean.
Remember, look, Solly, I mean, yes, Gauta is correct technically, because if Ramaphosa fired specifically those two women, not only would he be viewed as being, anti-dissent, in terms of his own internal party wranglings, but he would also be labeled as some sort of misogynist because they happen to be females, right? And so Gauta is absolutely correct. If he hasn't been up to now setting the precedence of monitoring performance and responding, because if you as a politician who's sitting on an elected position or deployed position in government, you're not an employee, you're not a director general, for instance. So you can't be fired willy-nilly. You've got really 5 years to do your work. And if he had set in place performance indicators, that possibly would have given him a better grounding or reasoning or foundation to say that, okay, these two ladies are not performing, because, I mean, we all know Lindiwe Sisulu has moved from another portfolio to the environment and tourism one at the moment. There was no reasoning. Every time there's a cabinet reshuffle, the same thing happened with Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, but you're mixing. I'm sorry. The cabinet ministers are not like director generals. They're not appointed all the same. But they are pure political employments. And then we always say in South Africa, ministers say, people are complaining that you're not saying much here. We need to give you the space to say this. Okay, speak for yourself. We always say in South Africa that ministers serve under the pleasure of the president. They're not like directors general with contracts that says, because you appointed me for 5 years, you fire me before, you must pay me for the rest of the contract. You can. Ministers are there for, and I said earlier, later the case, if you're a president, you put together a team around you of ministers, and suddenly some of them start calling you names and stuff outside that, surely you have the right to fire them. How do you work with people like that who are not part of your team? How do?
Yeah, but firing them for challenging him on the presidency
No,
in a legitimate conference.
It's not about concern. No. There's the challenge. Standing for presidency is one thing. Look at what they were calling him names before, especially Sisulu. She was telling him he doesn't belong here. He's not the right president. He must go. I'm not talking about her positioning herself to be elected. That's a different thing.
Yeah, but it's not much, man. It doesn't change the price of cheese. There are bigger issues of leadership, bigger leadership lapses on the part of Ramaphosa. Those are very small things that we are talking about. There are 9 economic reforms that he must implement in terms of infrastructure, water, ICT, making the public service more efficient, public education, policing, healthcare. Those things that are IMF, those 9 points that Zuma and Ramaphosa failed to implement, the economic reforms. Those are bigger issues that the country should be grappling with.
But he doesn't deliver on his own. He delivers with a team, surely.
He delivers with a team.
Yeah, but he must a team. Yeah.
He must inspire that team. He's not inspirational. Yes, he's not doing much at all in any field, and he's not going to do any much.
So if you had a team of people, say if you were the boss and the 3 of us were in your team, and 2 of us or 1 of us started going out there talking to the media bad things about you, you're such a bad leader, you would keep me because I have a PhD or a doctorate or whatever degree?
No, of course not.
In the context of South African politics, really, he's disempowered. In the context, and this is what Gauta, I think, is also trying to get to, is that in the context of South African politics, and I might sound like a broken record, but I'm telling you right now, with the party list system, Ramaphosa still is not directly elected by the citizens of this country. It is still the ANC. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if whether he comes out. It's the same as, PR councillors, MPLs, everybody who's basically a public representative in South Africa. None of them is directly elected, and therefore accountability is not direct. And so even the president of the country, we cannot hold him personally accountable. Sometimes people confuse the fact that when you go to court, let's say you take a department to court, you can obviously enlist the minister directly because the constitution gives the ministers, MECs, MMCs, all of them across the board, specific powers and authority, which they, by the way, don't use. And I can tell you now with certainty and evidence that majority, if not all of them, don't even know what the constitution says about their roles and responsibility. I can tell you a few in the legislature that I had to say, oh, listen to this clause number XYZ in this section of the constitution where it describes your duties as an MEC. But coming back to the question about whether he should fire Lindiwe and not fire politically, he's really, his hands are really tied because like I said to you, he fires them, he's going to be called anti-women. He fires them, he's going to be called factional and sectarian and divisive, and that he's even going against, because this unity thing in the ANC always gets used against the entire country. For the sake of the unity of the ANC and its 5,000 delegates, all of us must live in darkness. We mustn't get water. We must have potholes, just so that they can come together, kiss each other, hug each other, make each other feel good, and actually say, oh, the ANC is united. I don't know in any country in the world where the unity of a political party has anything to do with us and our level of happiness and our level of satisfaction, and so he really can't. His hands are tied right now.
Okay, so in the new NEC itself, we have Andy Lelungiswa, the dude who's still convicted of breaking a jar on the head of a DA councillor. We have Nomvula Mokunyani, God, I want to go. We have Malusi Gigaba. I've seen people using crazy expressions to describe him. I mean, and the ANC is saying we are renewing here for South Africa. What do you make of that stuff? I mean,
You
you
have
see the
David
names.
Makura and
No.
Sishe Zigalala. You have David
So-
Makura and Sishe Zigalala who have some of the highest unemployment in their provinces, who have done all sorts of. I mean, I have a case that I opened against David Makura. The Hawks couldn't even be bothered to investigate.
Let's see. Okay, Tsepo, yeah, okay. Let's Tsepo, what do you make of these people?
I think you are right. I think Mandisa is right in saying there is a developmental issue at hand that we shouldn't, obsess about globalization so much that we forget about incremental development. Maybe there's a story about professionalizing the ANC before we professionalize.
How do you do that? How do you professionalize?
How are you going to professionalize those guys?
Yeah, because because at this point where we are now, you and I.
To what end?
We're at the mercy. We're at the mercy of those 87 people in that powerful. Somebody said NEC, National Executive Committee. That powerful NEC. We're at their mercy, and unfortunately, to be quite frank, and I say this again, the political opponents of the ANC do not offer the voters of South Africa a convincing alternative. What you'll find is pretty much that these are sector-based sort of organizations that are looking out for themselves and for their personal or group interests, and not necessarily to try and solve the systems and the challenges that are facing the country. And I think beyond the political mess and crisis that we're facing, if we are to talk about what should happen tomorrow and the next 18 months, at least Ramaphosa should actually, as he promised, committed before, and now he has an opportunity. If they put you there for the second time, while you have systems and forces around you that will always shake you, but he should actually apply the principles of that were applied by Mbeki in his second term. He was taking decisions, even though we may not agree with those decisions, but he was taking decisions. And the last thing you want is for somebody to be muted and do nothing, praying to keep his job or to keep his friends in the ANC happy. I think that's an opportunity that he shouldn't miss.
You tell me if I'm wrong. You guys seem to be agreeing, even though you're saying it in different ways, that the ANC conference came and went. It was just an event that came. It was like a music festival, or if what it came, it went, but it hasn't changed anything. The South Africa is still in the same cock, as we say in South Africa. South Africa still must find other solutions outside of the ANC. I think Mandisa said it quite well. We need to find other ways to govern a country, to have a country run, because we're not going to rely on the ANC doing this thing. It's done its thing, it's happened, but what does it mean for South Africa? It doesn't seem like it means anything. It means anything for South Africa.
Yeah, I'm actually very I don't know whether to say surprised or shocked at that Tsepo could. Look, I mean, it's an idea, and it's a wonderful idea, and it's good to have ideas, because ideas keep us going and they keep us hopeful. But I mean, who's going to professionalize the ANC? Listen, let me give you a picture that you might want to, mull over a little bit. Do you understand that all political parties that are in the provincial legislature and in the National Assembly have got what you call party funding, right? Which is divided into 3 different types of funds. But collectively, the ANC doesn't get, in my estimation, I could be wrong, doesn't get anything less than what would amount to, let's say, around $1 billion from that money, especially if the ANC is a political party. And if you look at the DA, it's a few $100 million, right? And if you also take into consideration that because political parties have a right to fundraise, they do not have, they cannot participate in business. The Political Party Funding Act states that very clearly. They can't even use the money to buy buildings and property that they're going to actually lease out. It's money that must go and do constituency work. Right. Now, how bad is this situation? How are you going to professionalize, even with the best of intentions, an organization that has access to that much money and has had that money year on year since 1994, right?
And they can't pay salaries.
And they themselves cannot professionalize themselves. Here's the problem in South Africa. We've put too much power in the hands of not just politicians, but in the hands of top six leaders of all political parties. The Electoral Act is so weak in South Africa that that is why you find that every time somebody has to be impeached, there's all this rigmaroling. Let's go to the Constitutional Court just to decide on whether we should vote secretly or vote by a show of hands. I mean, and when you go to the Constitutional Court, it's money. So what I'm trying to say is that as much as that idea is great, but I think it's an idea that stems out of obviously the fact that we are good-natured people. Tsepo is a very good-natured person. He thinks in a normal world, if in an ordinary world of an ordinary person, a law-abiding citizen who has self-respect and dignity, you would want to come up with those kinds of proposals. But what do you not think that the political parties, all of them, whether they have one seat or however many seats, with the little bit of resources they get from our taxes, do not understand that they need to professionalize themselves? Every government department has a director general, a CFO, some sort of chief operations officer, they might call it differently. Actually, at national level, they have a few directors general and one director general, and a lot of senior staff to support the political office. And that should be enough to professionalize them.
Okay, guys, we're running out of time. I just want to give you each a minute, starting with Houta. Houta, what do you make of this? What does it mean for South Africa? Are you excited? Do you think South Africa has to stand away? I mean, what are your views about it? And then Tsepo, you go, and then Mandisa, you close. And for you, last and I close. So Houta, Tsepo, Mandisa, Houta?
Look,
Please
the
don't make
ANC
it
has
too
not-
long, okay? I'm giving you a lot more than a minute, each one of you.
All right, thanks. The ANC has not yet adopted resolutions. They'll do that in January. But I've studied what they've been doing over the years, and the resolutions that are on the table right now, I've looked at them. Generally, members of the ANC lack the sophistication, the integrity, the competency to engage policy. The African National Congress is no longer the policy-driven revolutionary movement. It is a personality-driven, closed, crony system. Their documents say so. It's not myself only who says so. The ANC documents, if you read what they call organizational renewal documents, says that the party is corrupt. There is a lot of gatekeeping. There is a social distance between the party and the people, and there is elitism. There is vote buying. There is a membership rigging in the organization. It's not I who says so. Every conference.
So where do we go from here? Where do we go from? What does
now
it mean?
going forward? Yes, sir. Going forward, this conference doesn't change anything because the values of the organization are so corrupted that it is incompetent to govern. The ANC cannot, if it cannot rid itself of these negative tendencies. Those are sins of incumbency. If they can't get rid of this sense of incumbency, then they might look. They've broken this country.
But you're spending a lot of time describing the ANC. We know the problem. Tell us what you think should happen. what
should happen is that political parties should raise funds. Opposition parties should raise funds, especially Action SA and the DA, and work as a pact. They should sign an election pact and go ahead and go together challenging the ANC's hegemony. So, and they should raise funds, and the South Africans should be encouraged to join these two political parties and give them resources to topple the ANC. It is the only revolutionary thing to do in the country at this juncture in our politics, in our development.
Right.
It's an state of emergency.
Seppo?
Well, I think I'm a pragmatist, and I think that there's very little we can do to transform or change the ANC in the form of governance and the things that happen within the ANC, especially when you consider the fact that you have those 87 very, very powerful, some other 6 powerful people who are going to tell us what's going to happen, and they're going to make decisions. So that's fact number one. We hope that South Africans are watching, and are watching with consistency, so that when we get closer to elections and we show them Sarafina, that they don't feel like we're back in apartheid and they must vote, of course, with their apartheid conscious. Because that's actually what happens in our politics. And then you expect a far more greater collaboration between opposition parties. And I think there's some encouragement when you look at the fact that Steenhuisen and Uncle Mashaba have begun to speak to each other again. And you hope that in the long run, they will be joined by the likes of the EFFs, Julius Malema and others, Bantu Holomisa, so that they have some sort of systemic coordination that can actually challenge the ecosystem of the ANC. For President Ramaphosa, I mean, citizens expect one thing and one thing only, is that he delivers on the promises that he makes, and that he appoints people around him that are capable to deliver, irrespective of their political allegiance and irrespective of who they are. If he does that, at least at the end of his tenure, he will be judged for the right things, for doing something, and for transforming our country, despite all the challenges he has faced. Sometimes pragmatism helps. But as for the ANC, honestly, I think South Africans must think for themselves, because the ANC is not going to stop thinking for itself.
Thank you, Seppo. Mandisa?
We missed a comment earlier by Clive, who was making a comment about in keeping the masses uneducated and then pouncing on their ignorance to keep them happy with
I saw that.
That's exactly I mean, Clive might be saying it his own way, but the reality is that we cannot afford a country that has majority of its productive people actually existing on the periphery of the economy and waiting for grants, and wallowing in depression in the townships where there isn't, the municipalities are basically collapsing those towns economically. So what needs, I mean, what between what needs to happen and what will actually happen, we know the result already, as Hauta mentioned much earlier. We are going to see political parties being in election mode. Political parties in South Africa are permanently focused on elections, whether it's in the coalition, the hung municipalities where nobody's received an outright majority to give them authority to govern on their own, and or whether they actually have to form coalition agreements. It's a mess. Every 2.5, 3 years, they need to be preparing for elections. That's another thing that we need to consider in the process of correcting the Unconstitutional Electoral Act. We need to consider whether to have one election. We're a country that is suffering. We don't have money. Each election is costing government directly hundreds of millions, if not billions of rands per election, if you look at the cost of the IEC. If those elections were actually all of them put under one roof and you get your 6 or 4 ballots or whatever, it might take a little bit longer. You might need an extra day, but the money that you're going to be saving, considering you also have by-elections in between. But for me, the last thing is that I wanted to, add this aspect that Seppo was talking about earlier about the land expropriation without compensation. We may have believed, some of us, in that virtuous, the land redistribution strategy. But if you look at some of the cases that are facing D.D. Mabuza currently, for instance, the case that Outer took to the Johannesburg or Pretoria High Court, I'm not sure, one of the two, that implicates him. If you look at the leaked I don't know if it was a memo or some kind of affidavit that was completed by some a man who's alleged to be from Mozambique and is a foreign national in South Africa, and who apparently has been some kind of hitman, allegedly
poisoning on behalf of Mabuza. Yeah,
on behalf of Mabuza. And me coming from Mpumalanga, I know those rumors. Many people, actually, if you can go to Nelspruit and speak to an ordinary person in the street, there's a general sense of fear for D.D. Mabuza. Why am I raising this? DD is no exception. All of them are operating on the same, because they basically developed a template of how to loot. And even Cyril even how he ended up winning this conference. It was because, according to the allegations, that some of the people who are very, implicated in certain wrongdoing went to him and said, listen, I mean, currently you're the best person we have, considering all the rotten apples that we all are. And so let's give this a fighting chance for our survival. So unfortunately, I know you don't like to hear it, Solly, but we can say what needs to happen in the next 2 years and whatever, but South Africa is terribly, terribly, terribly compromised through the Electoral Act. It's terribly compromised through monies that are filtering, that citizens have got no other means of actually even getting access to even financial statements and deeper reports, forensic, reports coming out of various government departments. We basically are sitting here like sitting ducks. We have nowhere to go. We've got nowhere to run. Going to the Constitutional Court is expensive. Going to High Court is expensive. Going to the Supreme Court of Appeal is expensive. And so the only option really is for us to hope and pray that over the next 2 years, political parties will not be narcissistically focusing on themselves. And as you said, if indeed there are talks between the DA and Action SA or amongst whichever political parties, if there are those talks, that those talks are genuine and not about their egos. If you look at the eThekwini situation right now, where the deputy mayor from ABC was removed, he was removed because the mayor was upset because Philani Mavundla didn't use his picture on a cleanup poster.
Oh God, it's crazy. I think that look, it's not true that I'm not wanting to hear the discussion about electoral reform. We need electoral reform. We need a whole basket of reforms in South Africa. We need, as South Africans, to look back at what we've come through over the past 28 years, almost 30 years now, and ask ourselves, how did things go wrong here, and how do we make sure we change things? Not individual. We don't replace Soli by Mandisa by Soli. We look at the systemic changes that need to happen. South Africans, and we shouldn't just leave it to politicians, Mandisa. The South Africans across the board, we've got NGOs, we've got other non-government organizations, religious communities, other formations of society. We need to come together, almost like another national collaboration of sorts needs to happen, where we say, okay, having gone through what we've gone through as a country, what do we need to change to make sure we don't get anybody else to do it again? Because I totally agree with all of you. The ANC is not the solutions that South Africa needs in order to stand up again. Will not come from the ANC. Actually, I consider the ANC to be that monster that's pressing its knee hard on South Africa's neck. South Africa will not stand up again and breathe while the ANC continues to press its knee on its neck. That's how I consider the ANC. And the solutions will not come from just the political parties who are just running around because of their big egos. They will come from us, South Africans, getting together and say, enough is enough, this far, no further. So Mandisa, I love you to bits. I agree with you. I know you're a strong iron lady. They know I call you the iron lady on this platform. And don't stop. Tepo, how I appreciate you guys. I hope that we shall have this discussion again in the new year. We shall obviously looking at other issues related to South Africa. Where to from here? The ANC is going to choose. I think Ramaphosa is going to change his cabinet. Some people will go, others will stay. It's going to be interesting to have a sense of who they are. It's going to be interesting to see whether these dodgy people who are elected recently into the NEC will stay, because the ANC can't convince us that it's renewing if it keeps the same dodgy people in its sphere. And to all you guys who are following this platform, thank you for your comments, for your questions. They obviously make these discussions even more interesting, more relevant. Please do not stop. And just for now, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, enjoy your festive season, get all the reasons to smile, laugh, have a really good time with friends and people that really matter to all of you. We'll see you again next year in January sometime. We'll announce it ahead of time. Thank you.
Good
Bye-bye.
evening.